Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by an episode of the old Vinyl Village Garage, your Firebird Restoration Station. The lock cylinder showed up for my steering column, so I'm going to do a quick little video here, putting that all back together. I've got some good information that maybe you don't know, like turn signal canceling cam, how that works, little springs inside. So let's say your turn signal stops operating, actually does not return back to neutral when you stir in the wheel and release it. It should have a little click, and of course turn signal cancels out and turns off. And if it doesn't, I can show you what typically causes that. Pretty easy fix. So if you've not been inside one of these columns, well, maybe that'll educate you on that. Got to still put the lock cylinder back in, turn signal switch, shove the wiring through. So I got some little tips on getting that put together. So if you've already had some columns torn apart or you don't need to tear it apart, yeah, I may not find a whole lot of use in this video besides maybe get a few laughs. So I stab myself with a pick, probably try and get the snap ring back on. If you've done it before, you know exactly what I mean. But nonetheless, let's dig into this thing, get this thing started, and get this column together so I can go for a drive in the old beast there. Okay, like I said, back to steering column. I'll get this thing put all together. These are for the door lock cylinders. I wanted to match sets, so the one key actually worked both options like it was supposed to originally. I said back in the day, there's a bit of a story that goes with this, but I don't have this doesn't match the door lock. And I'd like for them all match because, well, it's just how it's supposed to be, and it's a whole lot cleaner. Less keys I could actually lose and screw this thing up. So we'll get this thing cut open. Let's get the lock cylinder put in next. That's going to be our next step. Pieces. Alright, we'll try these keys too. Well, how about that? Alright, well, that should work. But just in case, quality of parts anywhere, it's probably worth trying the key in this here, make sure it works. That's the whole point of this exercise, changing the lock cylinder. So make sure the key works in those too. Can imagine going through all this and coming to find out I had the same problem I originally had, but kind of a disappointing situation. So let's try that. I'd say that's a winner. So, okay, that one's good. Let's try this one too. And it's good. So, I said we're going to put this thing together. I said just turn it forward to the, run position, and that should allow this thing to pop up. This should move freely. Kind of a little bump should pop in there. Well, you little devil. There it is. That was a whole lot more stubborn than I anticipated, but the problem is having is getting this part to engage inside the steering column. That has to line up with that slot inside. It was catching it, but just wouldn't go all the way. So now we're lined up. The little detent lines up with lock. Key should come out, no problem. I can actually turn it now. It'll be the run position and crank let off. So I'd say we should be okay. I should be able to turn it backwards, go to accessory. So that works. Now, older cars, they use just this here to kind of help keep the lock cylinder in place. Newer cars actually put a screw in them. There it went. Okay, well, so I wasn't holding my mouth right. Now, if you look in here a little closer, that's how that mounts in place. Now, on the back side of the turn signal switch, it's going to be the next part we're going to put in. Those little contacts reside there and there. That gives you the wonderful key buzzer sound. So if you want to disconnect that or disable it, you can cut the green and tan wires. But I like for everything to work. It's obnoxious. Thing to keep in mind is these turn signal switches super brittle. I had to replace it back then because the plastic here where the handle attached just fell apart and crumbled to dust. These things get old and brittle with time, so the best thing I would suggest, if it looks questionable or compromised or you don't know the age of it, replace it. Do yourself a favor, because they're not the worst things in the world to replace, but the plastic deteriorates, breaks down over time, turn signals stop working, brake lights stop working. It's just not a good deal. So if it's questionable or old, replace it with a new one. But what we have to do, though, we have new, used, old, you gotta get this thing stabbed down through the steering column. I'm gonna fish a coat hanger up from the other side and make a little hook and hope kind of help pull that thing through, but let's see how that goes. Of course, sorry. Now, let's get this thing lined up here, and hopefully this will help pull it back through. Now, you're taking it apart and putting it right back together. You can run a string or something through it too, just the same, but I gotta find a way to kind of help guide this thing through. There's a nice little channel for it to ride in, but let's be honest, it's a little snug. Nope. Okay. Well, how about that? That ought to work. Let me get you a little closer. What I've done, of course, like I said, I kind of hooked the wire. And actually hooked this thing. I kind of grabbed a couple of the wires with a little hook that I made and just pulled the thing through. A little tricky, a little bit of a tight situation, but it's mounted in place. Now this actually attaches to the steering column here once we get everything all positioned, but we need to get it all lined up with the steering shaft here first. All right, position that now. Simple as that. Now, it should be a couple, 3 screws to hold that on. And it would look something like them there. Oops. All right, you may have to move the switch to get to the last one. All right. I guess my opinion, I'm gonna go ahead and put the little hazard flasher switch pull handle thingy in here. It just screws on the end of the switch. All right. Well, the next bits here are going to be the turn signal switch. Of course, is mounted. Let's get that done. The thing about this is the horn slip ring or the horn button. It's also the canceling cam for the turn signals. Of course, you know, turn the turn signal on, you turn the steering wheel, and come back, it goes pop. Well, that's what this is. This part here is it actually releases on the springs in here. I'll get you a little closer, maybe that'll make a little more sense. But what we have to do, I guess, FYI, is in the future, if you ever have a car, the turn signal canceling cam's not working, say you steer left or you steer right, and it doesn't click the turn signal off, most likely this spring or this spring, you get one for left, one for right. I can't tell you which one's which, doesn't matter. But if it stops releasing or resetting when you turn the wheel one direction, most likely one of these 2 springs is actually broken off inside the column. To make a kit, pretty cheap, easy to do, but if you get the one, probably ought to replace them both. But like I said, the idea here is like educate you on turn signal canceling cam. If it stops working, either these little barbs are rotted out because it's just plastic, or maybe these 2 springs are broke. But next thing is, spring goes here on the steering shaft, and then the horn canceling cam slides down, and slip ring. Now it's indexed to line up a little window here, and this only fits on the steering shaft one way to make the canceling cam operate. So that's gonna be the next thing. Let's get this on, and there's a little snap ring that rides in here. I got a special tool to help get that in there. So this only fits one direction, fortunately, so I can't booger that up. And I got the spring behind it. Find the There it is, I think. Nope. There's one notch that's actually wider than the rest. There it is. There. All right. Now, obviously, you saw I put the spring in there behind there, so it just makes it a little bit difficult to get compressed. But they make a tool for that. There's a couple different versions of this. Now, this is the one I'm going to use. It actually screws on the end of the steering shaft here. And then you actually run this down. It'll actually compress that so you get the snap ring on. But don't forget to put the snap ring on the steering shaft first. Can't tell you how many times I've done that. Now you run the jack bolt or nut down. And it should compress this collar. Get you a little bit closer just for grins and giggles. The other tool all goes on, ran this nut down, pushes this in, pushes that in, and then see now the groove here for the snap ring to right. And it's nice to pull that thing down, snap that into there. A little side note too, having some fun in the steering column, but this is a little detent here. That thing pops up and down when you lock the steering wheel. There's running position. Of course, now I can steer. Turn the key to the off position, that pops up. That's what causes your steering wheel lock to operate. So in case that stops working, that little plunger may be gummed up or gooed up, but this one here's working pretty good. That's released, that steering wheel locked, so that should work just fine. But nonetheless, let's get this snap ring put into place and then I guess move on to the next part. Now, a couple picks seem to work pretty good for this process. Probably stab yourself 4 or 5 times. That's part of the job. And that'll do it. So in this case, I guess you do need kind of one specialty tool. Now they make these things pretty cheap. Most parts places have them. You can probably even rent them for free. I've had this thing for years. I can't even tell you what brand it is. It's probably the cheapest thing in the world, but it works great. But it's nice to have. It's kind of handy. To get you and your friend, you can push real hard with your fingers on here, pry it out, stab your buddy in the finger about 5 or 6 times. So, right, Mike? Anyway, never done that before. So I advise me in this case, this is one time as a specialty tool. Probably doesn't hurt to have. And again, pretty cheap. Well, next thing is just this little pretty ring here that goes on. It covers up all that goodness in there, and then basically just put the steering wheel back on. Now, of course, what you see here is the steering wheel doohickey spring compressor is put back on here because I forgot to put the turn signal lever back on. It goes in behind that. I have get carried away dragging you guys along on this journey, and I missed this important bit. So put this thing back on. Got to pop the snap ring out. Put this in. Then that goes on. Then we're finished with the steering column. Now, besides putting the steering wheel back on it, of course. So there you have it. All reassembled steering column should operate pretty good. Got the steering column pieces painted black because here's where I sanded off all the blue paint. It made one heck of a mess on my drop cloth, but hey, that's what it's for. So that's all good. Now the steering wheel, unfortunately, it needs a little restoration. It's got some cracking and some discoloring, so probably not going to put that on yet, but then I might. But anyway, I guess you wanted to see how my steering column went back together. I want to share that with you. Of course, little details here. I'll probably clean up the switch and do a little more clean up on the base of the steering column. But this car is going to be a good driver car, is what it's going to turn into. It's going to be super clean, super nice, but I don't have to get too carried away. It's my car, you know. Well, there you go. Steering column all together for the old black car. I got some names when they works, that kind of thing. I got Murder Bird. Mrs. doesn't like that one, but the car is going to be all black. So it's my high school car. My son called it the black car back in the day. He's like 3 or 4 years old. You know, he's pretty smart, pretty creative. You know, black car. It's been sticking forever and ever and ever. But Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But nonetheless, steering column done. Need to figure out what I'm going to do with the steering wheel. I may temporarily put it on so we can go for a drive in this whole thing here. I got the brake pedal, clutch pedal all working so I can stop it. I got the left-right selector assembly. We can do that. But I need to get the loud pedal going. So I got to dig through my box of goodies and find the throttle linkage that hooks to the intake, get that cleaned up so we can get that hooked up, because I sure like to hit that loud pedal and see what this thing will do. 494 cubic inches of Pontiac power. Never drove one of those yet, so that'd be a first time for me. But nonetheless, had a lot of fun with this time around. Hope you learned a little something. Of course, anything you'd like to see, know, or I guess any tips and tricks that I can do while I've got these things torn apart, let me know. I'll do a little video for you. But so pretty much everything nut and bolt, I'm going to have these things apart and putting them back together. So any part of the journey you'd like to see, let me know. I'll put it in the queue. But anyway, I kept you long enough. Appreciate you following me on the journey, and we'll see you next time.